The content of this video is drawn from the sources listed on screen.
A few days ago, the Watchtower released its new book titled Walk Courageously with God. And yes, once again, the same phrases, the same ideas, and the same mold. In this video, I'm going to explain why the Watchtower's publications are actually surprisingly poor in substance. I'll use their latest release as an example. But we won't stop at criticism. We'll also explore how we could broaden our horizons if we use the very same themes proposed in that book as a starting point. Are you ready? Before we get started, I want to make something clear. I deeply value my privacy. That's why the narrator's voice and image you're seeing were created with artificial intelligence. However, all the research, writing, and editing of this video were done by me, the creator. You can call me Nowachi. Let's take as an example the first chapter, titled Enoch Walked with God. This chapter, in a way, gives shape to the title of the entire book. The core lesson the governing body wants to convey is clearly seen in the highlighted sentence.
When Enoch faced the fury of those who hated his message, Jehovah took action to protect him.
The illustration shows exactly what they want to communicate. We see Enoch preaching boldly while a group of armed men rage at his words. Now, take a look at the screen. You're seeing part of the content from My Book of Bible Stories, published by the Watchtower in 1978 and aimed at children. As you can see, the lesson is basically the same as the one we just read in the new book. Don't you find it pathetic that when talking about Enoch, the self-proclaimed faithful and discreet slave can offer nothing more than the same lesson it gave to children 47 years ago? Has there really been no biblical research since then? As we'll see next, with just a bit of serious investigation, there's so much more that can be said about this character. Of course, my intention here isn't to preach to you, but to show just how poor in substance the Watchtower's publications truly are. Enoch is one of the most enigmatic characters in the Bible. In Genesis 5 verses 21 to 24, we're only told that he walked with God and that, at the age of 365, God took him. After that, in the Old Testament, he's mentioned only in genealogies, and we don't hear about him again until Hebrews 11 verse 5, where he's presented as an example of faith. But where we can actually find more information about Enoch is in the reference made to him near the end of the Bible, in the Epistle of Jude, verses 14 and 15. According to the New World Translation, it says,
Yes, the seventh one in line from Adam, Enoch, also prophesied about them when he said, Look, Jehovah came with his holy myriads to execute judgment against all, and to convict all the ungodly concerning all their ungodly deeds that they did in an ungodly way, and concerning all the shocking things that ungodly sinners spoke against him.
And yes, Jehovah's Witness, I know what you're thinking. There it is, crystal clear, God's condemning message against cynics, wicked apostates, and children of Satan. But hold on, read carefully, without prejudice and without pre-packaged lessons. Let's reason for a moment. Where does Jude get the idea that Enoch prophesied all of that if Genesis only says he walked with God and that God took him? To understand this, you need to open your mind and study how the biblical canon was formed. The canon accepted by Jehovah's Witnesses is the same one adopted by the Protestant reformers, Luther and Calvin, in the 16th century and officially incorporated into Protestantism through the Westminster Confession of Faith in 1646. The Protestant canon differs from the Catholic one only in the Old Testament. But what criteria did the Protestants use to decide which books to accept and which to reject? Their reasoning was that God had appointed the Jewish people as custodians of his word, so they considered it proper to accept only the books recognized by the rabbinical Hebrew canon. And why do Jehovah's Witnesses accept that same canon? Simple, because they're a religious denomination that originated from Protestantism. For its part, the Catholic Church defined its canon in the 16th century, specifically in 1546 during the Council of Trent. On that occasion, 7 additional Old Testament books were recognized as inspired: Tobit, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, Baruch, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, along with some additions to Esther and Daniel. The argument for including them was, first, that they were already commonly accepted by the earliest Christian communities, and second, that all of them were part of the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament used by the first Christians and widely quoted in the New Testament. In other words, they weren't included on a whim. But let's go even deeper. The Protestant schism wasn't the first one to occur within Christianity. In ancient times, there were many others. A very important one took place in the 11th century, with the separation between the Church of Rome and the Eastern churches, known as the Great Schism of the East. From that moment on, Christianity was divided into two major branches. The Roman Catholic Church, under the authority of the Pope, and the Orthodox Church, made up of several autonomous patriarchates such as Constantinople, the Greek, and the Russian. Each of these churches developed its own canon. For example, the Greek Orthodox Church preserves 49 books in the Old Testament, while the Russian Orthodox Church recognizes up to 51. In contrast, the Catholic Church maintains 46 books, and the Protestant churches, following the Hebrew canon, only 39. What should be clear to all of us is that these differences exist because Jesus and his apostles never left behind a definitive biblical canon. So each of these churches has its own reasons for its own canon, reasons deeply rooted in its history, culture, and theological evolution. Another schism, directly related to the topic we're discussing, took place long before the split between East and West. It happened in the 5th century, after the Council of Chalcedon in the year 451. On that occasion, the churches separated over very subtle theological differences concerning the nature of Christ. This led to the formation of what came to be known as the Oriental Orthodox churches, such as the Coptic Church of Egypt, the Syrian Church, the Armenian Church, and the Ethiopian Church, each with its own biblical canon, developed according to the particular history and traditions of its community. Among them, I want to highlight the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest in the Christian world with around 40 million believers, more than 4 times the number of Jehovah's Witnesses, who are often viewed as a religious giant. This church developed its own theological and liturgical tradition, as well as a particularly broad biblical canon that includes books such as Enoch and Jubilees, which are absent from both the Catholic and Protestant canons. And just like every other branch of Christianity, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has its own reasons for establishing its biblical canon. Now, in the specific case I want to address, the Book of Enoch. This text, considered canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, was known and quoted by very early Christian writers as far back as the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Writers of the stature of Origen regarded it as a valuable book, though not inspired, while Tertullian did consider it inspired, even though he admitted that most Christians of his time did not share that view. But what's most important for our discussion is that Jude, and I'm referring, of course, to the author of the biblical epistle that bears his name, also considered the Book of Enoch a valuable text. We don't know whether he viewed it as inspired, but he valued it enough to quote it directly. In verses 14 and 15 of his epistle, Jude reproduces almost word for word Enoch 1:9. But take note, we're specifically referring to the first book of Enoch, also known as Ethiopian Enoch. There are 2 later writings, 2nd Enoch, of Greek origin and preserved in Slavonic, and 3rd Enoch, of Hebrew origin and mystical in nature. But neither of them was known in apostolic times. The only one that Jude, Origen, and Tertullian could have read was the first book of Enoch, the oldest of the 3, originally written in Aramaic several centuries before Christ, translated into Greek, and preserved in full only in the Ethiopian version, which still forms part of the biblical canon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. But the references to the Book of Enoch are not limited to the letter of Jude. In fact, its influence can be felt in several passages of the New Testament. In Enoch, we find, for example, the first prophetic description of the Messiah as the Son of Man, a title that Jesus repeatedly used to refer to himself in the Gospels. We can also see the imprint of Enoch in the book of Revelation, where many of its visions share the same symbolism and structure. To give just one example, when Revelation 20 verse 12 says that the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, it draws directly from Enoch 47:3, where it describes how the books were opened before God. As always, I'm speaking to Jehovah's Witnesses and to PIMOs, but also to Jehovah's Witnesses who still have intellectual restlessness. Doesn't it strike you as fascinating that the biblical writers knew, respected, and even quoted the book of Enoch, a book practically unknown to Jehovah's Witnesses? Doesn't it make you curious how the different biblical canons in Christendom were formed? I'm saying all this because I'm trying to pull you, just for a moment, out of that small watchtower world you carry in your head. There is much, much more knowledge than what the watchtower teaches in its publications. Unfortunately, sectarian thinking narrows the options for knowledge. But if you're among those who still have intellectual questions, here are a few to reflect on. What do the writings of 1st and 2nd century Christians like Clement, Ignatius, and Polycarp talk about? Wouldn't it be interesting to know what these men, who lived very close to the time of Christ, actually thought? Wouldn't it be interesting to know the contents of those books that were respected even by biblical writers, like the Book of Enoch, for example? Why do you cling to a 39-book Old Testament if the Septuagint had anywhere from 46 to 51, depending on the version? Aren't the biblical canons of the various Orthodox churches just as respectable? Is everything Jehovah's Witnesses tell me about the Bible actually true? For example, is there any evidence that Moses wrote the book of Job? Is there really evidence that the prophetic books were written before the events they describe? Is there objective evidence for the dates Jehovah's Witnesses give for when the biblical books were written? And what about the authors? Do we have solid evidence about who wrote the books of the Bible? Or are we dealing with speculation? I haven't finished reading the new Watchtower book, but I can summarize it without reading it. Preach, attend the meetings, be loyal to the governing body. In short, that's what all Watchtower books and publications are about, my friend. Don't let your whole world consist only of the narrow horizon the Watchtower sets before you. Broaden your knowledge. Open your mind. Don't stop asking questions. Be curious. Love the truth, damn it. Let me ask you something. Do you want this content to reach more and more people who need it? It's really simple, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Just hit subscribe, turn on a notification bell, leave a like, and share this video with anyone you think it could help. Thank you for being part of this project. See you soon.